I was 17 when I first learned that silence has a weight. It presses down on your chest like iron, steals the air from your lungs, and turns every breath into a confession you never wanted to make. I'm 71 years old now, and that weight has never lifted. Not once. Not even when I wrapped myself in holy robes and told the world I belonged to God. Because the truth is, I never belonged to Him. I belonged to my guilt. And guilt, my friends, is a master far crueler than any deity you could imagine. They called me Sister Margaret for 48 years. Sister Margaret, the devoted one. Sister Margaret, who never missed morning prayers. Sister Margaret, whose hands were always folded, whose eyes were always lowered, whose voice was always soft as a whisper in an empty church. Children would run to me after Sunday service, their mothers would smile, and old men would nod with respect as I passed. They thought I had found peace in God's house. They thought I was one of the blessed ones, the chosen, the pure. But every single night when I closed my eyes in that narrow bed in my cell, I saw His face. And I saw hers. The child I never let breathe. If you're hearing this now, it means my heart finally stopped. The doctors told me 3 months ago that it wouldn't be long. Cancer, they said. Stage 4, spread everywhere. I smiled when they told me. I actually smiled. Because after all these years of begging for punishment, it had finally arrived. And it looked exactly like I thought it would. Slow and merciless and absolutely deserved. But before I go, before this voice goes silent forever, I need to tell someone the truth. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're sitting in your living room right now, or driving in your car, or lying in bed unable to sleep. Maybe you're carrying your own weight, your own silence. And maybe, just maybe, my story will help you understand that you're not alone in the dark. So let me take you back to 1971, back to when I was just Sarah, a girl with brown eyes and too much hope, living in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone and secrets were currency more valuable than gold. I met him in March. His name was Daniel. He was 26, married, father of 2. I was 17, working weekends at the county library, dreaming of college and cities and a life bigger than the one I was born into. He came in every Thursday afternoon, always looking for books about engineering, about bridges and structures and things that could hold weight without breaking. I remember thinking how ironic that was later. How he knew everything about building things that wouldn't collapse, but nothing about holding a young girl's heart without crushing it. Now, before you judge me, before you think I was foolish or naive or simply young and stupid, let me tell you something. Love doesn't ask permission. It doesn't care about your age or his wedding ring, or the consequences that will follow. It just arrives, uninvited and overwhelming, and it changes everything in an instant. One moment you're shelving books in the fiction section, and the next moment he's standing there smelling like coffee and autumn leaves, asking if you've read Steinbeck. And your whole world tilts on its axis. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you somewhere safe? Somewhere quiet? Write it in the comments, please. I need to know my words reached someone, somewhere. That this confession didn't just disappear into nothing like everything else I ever tried to say. We met in secret for 7 months. An old cabin outside of town that belonged to his uncle. Thursday afternoons became my religion, and he became my God. I worshipped him the way desperate people worship anything that makes them feel less alone. I gave him everything, my body, my trust, my future, and he took it all with promises that tasted like honey but dissolved like sugar in rain. December came early that year. Snow fell in heavy sheets, and I remember standing in my parents' bathroom, staring at the little plastic stick in my hand, watching the 2 pink lines appear like a verdict. From a judge I'd never see. Pregnant. I was pregnant at 17, with a married man's child in a town where everyone went to the First Baptist, church on Sunday morning and believed that girls like me deserved exactly what they got. I told him the next Thursday. I remember his face went white, actually white, like someone had drained all the blood from his body in seconds. He sat down on the cabin's old wooden chair and put his head in his hands, and when he looked up at me, there was no love in his eyes anymore. There was fear, and fear makes monsters of even the gentlest men. He gave me $500 in cash 2 weeks later, handed it to me in an envelope with an address written on a piece of paper. A clinic in Columbus, 2 hours away. He said he'd drive me there, wait in the car, drive me back, and then we'd never speak of it again. He said it like he was doing me a favour, like he was solving a problem, like my body was a mistake that needed erasing. I went. God help me, I went. January 14th, 1972. The coldest day of my life, and not because of the weather. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and fear. There were 3 other women there, none of them looking at each other. All of us pretending we were somewhere else, someone else, anything else but what we actually were. Girls who had made choices or had choices made for them. And now we were all sitting in plastic chairs, waiting for our names to be called like we were at the DMV. Instead of the edge of a cliff, we were about to jump off. They called my name. Sarah Mitchell. I stood up. My legs were shaking so badly I thought I might fall. A nurse with kind eyes and tired hands led me down a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. She asked me if I was sure. I said yes. She asked me if anyone forced me. I said no. Both answers were lies, but she wrote them down anyway because that's what the paperwork required. I won't tell you the details of what happened in that room. Some horrors are too specific to share, but I will tell you this. When it was over, when I was lying on that cold table staring at the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, I felt something break inside my chest. Not my heart, something deeper than that. My soul, maybe. Whatever part of me believed I deserved forgiveness or grace or a second chance, that part died on that table along with everything else. Daniel drove me home in silence. He dropped me off 2 blocks from my house, handed me 3 $20 bills for, and I quote, "Anything you need," and then he drove away. I never saw him again. He moved his family to Michigan that spring, started fresh, built bridges somewhere else, left me standing in the ruins of mine. For 3 weeks I kept the secret. I stayed in bed, told my parents I had the flu, and tried to hold myself together with shaking hands and silent tears. But secrets like mine have a smell. They seep through walls and floorboards. They whisper themselves in small towns, where people pay attention to who's buying what at the pharmacy and whose car was parked where. My mother found out first. I don't know how. Maybe she saw the clinic paperwork I'd hidden under my mattress. Maybe someone from church saw Daniel's car dropping me off that day. Maybe mothers just know when their daughters have crossed a line they can never uncross. She came into my room on a Tuesday afternoon in early February, and her face was a mixture of horror and disgust that I'll never forget. She didn't yell. That would have been easier somehow. Instead, she just stood there in my doorway and asked one question. Is it true? I couldn't lie to her. Not to that face. So I nodded. She closed her eyes like I'd slapped her. Then she said, "Your father cannot know this. Do you understand me? He cannot know. But small towns don't keep secrets well." Somebody talked. Maybe it was the receptionist at the clinic who went to our church. Maybe it was Daniel's wife who must have found out somehow. Maybe it was just the universe deciding that I hadn't suffered enough yet. My father found out 3 days later. I was downstairs making tea when I heard my mother's voice upstairs, pleading, desperate. And then I heard my father's voice loud and breaking, shouting words I'd never heard him say before. Words about shame and sin, and how could his daughter, his little girl, do something like this? I stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen, listening to my entire world collapse above me. Then silence. Then my mother screaming. I ran upstairs and found him on the floor of their bedroom, clutching his chest, his face grey and twisted in pain. My mother was on her knees beside him, begging him to breathe, to stay with her, to please God just breathe. I called for an ambulance, but we lived 20 minutes from the nearest hospital in good weather, and it was snowing again, heavy and thick. He died before they got there. 62 years old. Heart attack. Massive and instant. The doctor said it would have happened eventually, that he had blockages they didn't know about, that it wasn't anyone's fault. But I knew better. I knew what killed him. The shock. The shame. The knowledge that his daughter had destroyed everything he'd raised her to be. I killed my father. That's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. The baby I terminated and the father I murdered with my choices. 2 deaths on my hands before I turned 18. The funeral was small. Our church community came, of course, but they looked at me differently now. The story had spread like fire through dry grass. Whispers followed me everywhere. The Mitchell girl. The one who got herself in trouble with a married man. The one who killed her baby and broke her father's heart. Even the pastor, who'd known me since I was baptized, couldn't look me in the eye when he offered his condolences. My mother didn't speak to me for a week after we buried him. She moved through the house like a ghost, cooking meals neither of us ate, sitting in my father's chair staring at nothing. Then one morning I woke up and found her packing her suitcase. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Kentucky," she said, not looking at me. "To stay with your Aunt Helen and Uncle Roy." Aunt Helen was my mother's older sister, 73 years old and widowed. Uncle Roy was her second husband, 76, mostly deaf. They lived on a farm 3 hours away from anything that mattered. "For how long?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She stopped packing then. Turned and looked at me with eyes so empty it was like staring into a well with no bottom. "I can't be here anymore, Sarah. I can't look at you. I can't walk past his chair. I can't go to church and feel them all staring at us. I can't breathe in this house. Mama, please," I whispered. "Don't," she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Don't call me that. Don't ask me for anything. You took everything from me already." She finished packing in silence. Called a taxi. Left $30 on the kitchen table for groceries, and then she stood by the door with her suitcase and said the last words she ever said to me. "Don't call me. Don't write. Don't come looking for me. I need to forget you exist, Sarah. It's the only way I can survive this." And then she left. I stood in that empty house for 3 days, not eating, barely drinking, just sitting in the silence and wondering if this was what death felt like. If maybe I'd actually died on that clinic table and this was hell. This endless loop of loss and guilt and isolation. On the 4th day, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the girl staring back. Her eyes were hollow. Her skin was grey. She looked like something already buried, and I thought, this is how it happens. This is how girls like me disappear. We drift into darker and darker places until we're not girls anymore, just bodies moving through the world looking for ways to destroy ourselves more efficiently. I could see the path ahead of me so clearly. I'd start drinking, or using pills, or I'd end up in some man's apartment trading my body for rent money because I had nowhere else to go. I'd become a cautionary tale mothers told their daughters. Remember Sarah Mitchell? This is what happens when you make bad choices. I was terrified of that future. More terrified than I'd been of anything. Even more than facing my father's body on the bedroom floor. Because that future felt inevitable, like gravity, like I was already falling and there was no way to stop. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went looking for walls to hide behind. The church was the obvious choice, wasn't it? Where else does a ruined girl go when she's run out of options? I'd heard stories about convents taking in women who had nowhere else to turn. Magdalene laundries in Ireland, Catholic homes for unwed mothers, places that promised redemption through work and prayer and penance. I'm not stupid. I knew those places had reputations. I knew some of them were cruel. But cruelty was familiar to me by then. Cruelty I could handle. It was kindness I couldn't bear. Kindness required me to believe I deserved it. I found St. Catherine's through a priest in the next county over, Father Michael, who didn't know my story. I told him I felt called to religious life, which was the first of 10,000 lies I'd tell over the next 5 decades. He gave me information about several convents that accepted postulants. St. Catherine's was the farthest away, 90 miles north, far enough that nobody there would know the name Sarah Mitchell or what she'd done. I applied in April. Attended an interview in May. They asked me why I wanted to join their community, and I told them I'd experienced a profound calling to serve God, which was lie number 2. They asked if I was running from something, and I said no, which was lie number 3. They asked if I'd been baptised and confirmed, if I believed in the teachings of the Catholic Church, if I was prepared for a life of poverty, chastity and obedience. Yes, I said. Yes to everything. Yes to whatever would get me behind those walls. They accepted me that summer. I entered as a postulant in September of 1972, 6 months after everything fell apart. I sold my parents' house for almost nothing, gave most of the money to the convent as my dowry, kept barely enough to buy the few items I was allowed to bring, and Sister Margaret was born from the ashes of Sarah Mitchell. Now, I need you to understand something important, and I need you to really hear this. The sisters at St. Catherine's were good women. Are good women. They are not like me. They didn't come to the convent running from sin and shame. They came because they genuinely felt called by God, because they wanted to dedicate their lives to prayer and service and community. They were and are pure in ways I could never be. Every convent has a few bad apples, I suppose. Women who enter for the wrong reasons. Women who are hiding instead of serving. Women who wear the habit like a costume, a disguise, a shield. I was the rotten fruit in that beautiful orchard. I was the lie wearing holy robes. And for 48 years, I sat among them in chapel, singing the same hymns, reciting the same prayers, pretending I was one of them, when really I was an imposter, a fraud. A woman playing dress-up in borrowed holiness. They never knew. That's the worst part. Sister Teresa, Sister Anne, Sister Clare, Mother Superior Beatrice, all those beautiful souls who welcomed me and trusted me and called me their sister. They had no idea they were living with someone as corrupted and broken as me. They thought I was devoted. They thought I woke up at 4:30 every morning because I loved God. They didn't know I woke up that early because sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant seeing my father's face, seeing Grace's face, seeing everything I'd destroyed. I want to be absolutely clear about this, because I don't want anyone watching this to think that convents are filled with women like me. They're not. Most nuns are extraordinary people who have given up everything, comfort, family, personal freedom, to serve something greater than themselves. They are teachers, nurses, social workers, counsellors, people who actually make the world better just by existing in it. I was not one of them. I was a coward hiding in their midst. The early years at St. Catherine's were the hardest. Everything was new and unfamiliar. The schedule, the silence, the constant communal living with 50 other women. We woke before dawn for lauds, morning prayer sung in Latin while the sky was still dark. Then Mass, breakfast in silence, work assignments, more prayer, lunch, more work, afternoon prayer, dinner, evening prayer, and finally bed at 9. Every single day. No variation. No escape. I thought the routine would save me. I thought if I just kept moving, kept my hands busy, kept my mouth forming prayers even if my heart wasn't in them, eventually something would click. Eventually I'd feel it. The presence of God, the peace that surpasses understanding, the forgiveness I was supposedly earning through all this performance. But years passed and nothing clicked. I scrubbed floors and thought about my father dying. I weeded gardens and thought about my mother's empty eyes. I folded linens and thought about Grace, about what she'd be doing if she existed. Learning to walk, learning to talk, first day of kindergarten, losing her first tooth. I lived 2 lives simultaneously, the visible one where I was Sister Margaret, dutiful and quiet, and the invisible one where I was still Sarah, still 17, still bleeding in a clinic in Columbus. The other sisters started to notice I was different. Not bad, just distant. "You're so contemplative, Margaret," Sister Teresa would say. So deep in prayer, she meant it as a compliment. She had no idea that when she saw me kneeling in chapel, perfectly still, staring at the crucifix, I wasn't praying. I was arguing with God, screaming at him in my mind, asking him why he let any of this happen, why he gave me a heart capable of love if he was just going to punish me for using it, why he created babies if he was going to let girls like me destroy them, and God never answered. Year after year, prayer after prayer, nothing. Just silence. Just my own voice echoing back at me in the dark. I started to hate him. That's the truth. I hated God with a fury that burned hotter than anything I'd ever felt. I hated him for making me fall in love with Daniel. I hated him for the pregnancy. I hated him for my father's heart attack. I hated him for my mother's abandonment. I hated him for building a world where young girls get destroyed and everyone calls it justice. But I couldn't say any of that out loud. So I kept kneeling, kept folding my hands, kept bowing my head. And I lied. To everyone, to myself, to God himself. I lied so much and so often that lying became prayer, became devotion, became the only form of worship I knew. The irony is that everyone thought I was holy. Visitors to the convent would ask to speak with Sister Margaret because I was so serene, so wise, so close to God. I counselled women about their failing marriages. I held the hands of dying parishioners and told them they were going home to Jesus. I taught Sunday school to children who looked at me with trust and innocence and asked me questions about heaven that I couldn't answer honestly. Sister Margaret, will I see my dog in heaven? Sister Margaret, does God really hear all our prayers? Sister Margaret, are you happy? No, I wanted to scream. No, I'm not happy. I'm a liar and a hypocrite and I don't belong here. I killed my baby and my father, and I've been hiding in this building for decades, pretending to be something I'm not. I don't know anything about God or heaven or prayer. I'm just a scared girl wearing a costume, waiting to be found out. But instead I smiled and said, "Yes, sweetheart. God hears everything. And he loves you very much." More lies. Always more lies. The years turned into decades. My 20s disappeared. Then my 30s. Then my 40s. I watched new postulants enter, bright-eyed and faithful, and I envied them so much it physically hurt. They were real. Their devotion was genuine. When they prayed, they meant it. When they sang hymns, their faces glowed. When they took their final vows, there were tears of joy because they were finally officially married to Christ. When I took my final vows at 24, I felt nothing. Just the weight of the rosary they placed around my neck, and the heavier weight of knowing I'd be wearing this lie for the rest of my life. I thought about leaving 1,000 times. Just walking out the front gate and never coming back. But where would I go? Back to Ohio where everyone knew my name and my shame? To some city where I'd have to explain the gap in my resume, the years spent in a convent that taught me nothing practical? To my mother in Kentucky who told me never to contact her? No, I was trapped. Not by the convent walls, but by my own choices. By the architecture of my guilt. I'd built my own prison, and the only way out was death, so I stayed. And the longer I stayed, the harder it became to imagine any other life. This became normal. This became all I knew. Sister Margaret became more real than Sarah Mitchell ever was. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person altogether. I became a function, a role, a thing in a habit that performed tasks, and said words and existed without actually living. Sister Teresa died in 2003. Sister Anne died in 2009. Sister Claire died in 2014. I held their hands as they passed. I said prayers over their bodies. I watched them leave this world with peace on their faces because they genuinely believed they were going somewhere better, and I hated them for it. For their faith, for their certainty, for the fact that they got to die believing in something while I was going to die believing in nothing. The darkness inside me grew worse as I got older. The anger festered. The guilt metastasized. I started having thoughts I'd never had before. Dangerous thoughts. Late at night in my cell, I'd imagine stepping out of a window, just one step into nothing and finally being free. I'd stand in the kitchen holding a knife and wonder how much it would hurt. I'd take my blood pressure medication and think about what would happen if I took all of them at once. I never did any of it. Not because I was strong or faithful or afraid of hell. I just couldn't give myself even that mercy. I deserved to suffer. I deserved to wake up every morning and live through another day of this hollow existence. Suicide felt like an escape I hadn't earned, so I kept going. Kept praying prayers I didn't mean. Kept counselling people about faith I didn't have. Kept wearing this habit and this name and this mask, until last year when the pain started. At first I thought it was just age. I was 70 by then. My body was breaking down in 100 small ways. But this pain was different, deep and constant and growing. I ignored it as long as I could because part of me welcomed it. Finally, I thought. Finally, the punishment I've been waiting for. Mother Superior insisted I see a doctor. I went. They ran tests. More tests. Scans and blood work and biopsies. And then the diagnosis came back. Cancer. Stage 4. Liver, pancreas, lymph nodes. Inoperable. Untreatable. 6 months, maybe 8 if I was lucky. The doctor looked sad when he told me. He kept saying he was sorry, that there were pain management options, hospice care, things they could do to make me comfortable. I thanked him. Then I went back to St. Catherine's, and for the first time in 48 years I felt something like relief. This was it. This was finally the end. Mother Superior offered to let me go to a hospice facility, but I asked to stay here. She agreed. The sisters have been kind, bringing me meals I can't eat, sitting with me when the pain gets bad, praying over me like I'm one of them instead of the fraud I actually am. They don't know the truth. They're going to hear this recording after I'm gone, and they're going to be devastated. Mother Superior will feel betrayed. The younger sisters will be confused. The older ones will be heartbroken. I'm sorry for that. I truly am. They deserved better than having to share their lives with someone like me. But I couldn't keep pretending. Not at the end. Not when I'm about to meet whatever comes next. Because here's what I've learned in 71 years of life and 48 years of hiding. You cannot outrun yourself. You can change your name, change your clothes, change your entire life, but the person you were is still inside you, waiting. And eventually, one way or another, you have to turn around and face her. I'm facing her now. Sarah Mitchell, 17 years old, pregnant and terrified, making the worst choice of her life and then spending 50 years trying to disappear because of it. And you know what I want to say to her? I forgive you. It took me 5 decades, but I finally forgive you, Sarah. You were a child. You were scared. You were alone. And the adults around you failed you. Daniel failed you. Your parents failed you. The church failed you. God, if he exists, failed you. You made a choice in impossible circumstances, and yes, it was the wrong choice. But you were 17. You didn't have the tools or the support or the wisdom to make a better one. And you've paid for it every single day since. You don't have to pay anymore. You can rest now. We can both rest now. The morphine is making everything soft around the edges. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm in my cell or back in my childhood bedroom. Sometimes I think I hear my father's voice downstairs, or my mother humming in the kitchen. Sometimes I see Grace, older now, maybe in her 30s, and she's smiling at me like she understands. Like she forgives me too. I don't know if any of that is real. Probably not. Probably just my brain misfiring as it shuts down. But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. I'm choosing to believe that somewhere, somehow, the people I hurt can see that I'm sorry. That I always was. That the guilt I carried was its own kind of penance, my own kind of hell. Maybe God will forgive me. Maybe he won't. Maybe he never existed in the first place, and I spent my entire life arguing with empty air. But it doesn't matter anymore, because I forgive me. And that, I think, is the only forgiveness that ever really mattered. If you're watching this and carrying something heavy, something you did that you can't take back, please listen to me. Please hear what I'm saying. You don't have to run. You don't have to hide. You don't have to spend 50 years in a prison of your own making. Face it. Name it, say it out loud. I made a mistake. I hurt someone. I hurt myself. I did something I wish I could undo. And then, as hard as it is, as impossible as it seems, try to forgive yourself. Not because you deserve it. Not because what you did was okay. But because you deserve to live. Actually live. Not just exist, but live with purpose and presence and the possibility of joy.
I never gave myself that chance. I chose suffering instead. I chose punishment. I chose to become Sister Margaret, the holy woman who never smiled, who never laughed, who never let herself feel anything but guilt. Don't do what I did. Don't waste your one precious life hiding from yourself. The pain is getting worse now. The morphine isn't helping as much as it used to. Mother Superior says it won't be long. Maybe days, maybe hours. I'm ready. I'm tired of fighting. Tired of pretending. Tired of being two people, the visible one and the invisible one, neither of them whole. When I close my eyes for the last time, I want to close them as myself. As Sarah Mitchell, who became Sister Margaret, who is finally, at the very end, just a human being who suffered and survived, and tried her best with the broken pieces she was given. That's all any of us can do. That's all any of us really are. Thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing this. Thank you for letting me tell the truth before the silence comes. My name was Sarah Mitchell. I became Sister Margaret, and now I'm going home, wherever that is, whatever that means. I'm ready.